So really quickly, let's go ahead and jump into who made it into the final quadrant of the bracket. Yes, new camera, so everything is very different, but it's higher quality. Starting with the top, the first and most upvoted character by quite a bit for me to include in the final quadrant was Geralt of Rivia. I've already started the Witcher series as of yesterday, so that should be no problem for me to include by the time I get there. I also have Logan Ninefingers from the First Law trilogy, Enemandor Rake from Malazan, I think I said all that right, Snape from Harry Potter, Sauron from The Lord of the Rings, Aram from The Wheel of Time, we got another one in there, and Lightsong from Warbreakers. So those are going to be the ones that continue on into this bracket. And I did change up the order of the bracket a little bit. I made it so Perrin and Jon Snow are not going to be going against each other in the first fight, because apparently that made some people upset. I don't really get it, but moving on, we're going to go into the second fight of round one, Jaime Lannister versus Galad Damodred. I look so small on the new camera. I get why you guys don't think I'm 6 foot tall. Hold up. Does that help at all? I mean, the 6 feet line's, it's right there, so I hope that helps. Also, real quick, starting now, I'm also always going to include the tiebreaker within these fights because it prevents a tie from ever being a thing, and it's a really cool thing to compare these characters with. So, the categories we have to compare these characters being origin, development, role, interest, relationships, who would win in a fight, and how they would do in each other's worlds. Let's go ahead and jump into the first category, origin. Now, the origin for these two guys is freakishly similar. Both kind of pompous, noble guys born into the richest, wealthiest families in their respective world. Both have a sister and a brother. And while one has a father who's still alive and the other a mother, they really do echo each other in some extreme ways. What really differs is what happens with them later in life. One becomes a piece of and the other becomes a moral You can probably fill in who's who. Man, I look skinny and weird on this new camera. The haircut's not helping. You're definitely higher. Maybe that's what's weird. Let's adjust that. How's that? Now you're like level with me. I feel like that's better. Let's go with that. I know it kind of bothers people when I do this, but I'm going to go ahead and throw origin into a wash because neither one of these characters' origin goes super in depth, and they're eerily similar and both executed incredibly well by these two masterful authors. At this point, I'm just going to kind of call it a wash. So next up we have development. Who develops better as a character? And there's pretty much a default winner here because of time devoted to character. Galad does not get a ton of time in the reader's eyes. That being said, Galad does kind of unravel for the reader in some interesting ways. He is presented to us as basically the king of nobles, someone who kind of feels like he's morally superior to everyone else and will rat out his siblings at any given point. But as we get to know Galad better and understand the kind of moral absolutism he believes and how he wants to just improve the world in any way he can, you can't help but kind of sympathize with the guy a little bit.
Just a little bit.
He does actually walk the walk he talks, and what he talks is just everyone should treat each other with respect and be a decent person. Hold yourself to a higher standard as he does himself. Jaime Lannister, on the other hand, is kind of the exact opposite of this path.
Where was it you graduated from again? The University of Duh.
Jaime Lannister presents himself as this super good noble who is perfect because he's part of the Lannister family, but deep down, we all know Jaime's really like. Jaime is... I can never decide if I like or hate him. He's a garbage person who will do some horrible things, both in the TV show and in the books. That being said, does he really develop that much from the scum we're introduced to at the beginning of the series? I would say yes, and it makes him more likable because what he goes through and his development that he goes through throughout the Song of Ice and Fire is very understandable. And while he continues to do horrid things like sleep with his sister and kill people left and right and continue to serve the side of this series that no one likes, he's definitely the most likable person on that side, and that's because of how well his character is presented to us. His trials and tribulations are relatable even though his actions are not. And because of this aspect of his character being so fascinating and the unveiling of Jaime Lannister's character as a whole being so meticulously crafted, I have to give the development point to him, also because Galad does not get nearly as much time to develop. Next up, we have the role they play in the world they're in. They begin to diverge even more here in terms of the characters that they are. Galad's role evolves into one where he leads the Children of the Light down the correct path they should actually be on. It's a pretty interesting role for him, and it fits him well like a glove. That being said, the events that lead him being there are a little blurry. We don't really get his early career in the Children of the Light, and people tend to just follow him because he's Galad. Spoiler warning for Galad's storyline. He eventually just challenges the head of the Children of the Light, kill him, and take over this massive army. It happens very quickly for him, and the execution of that role, well, it fits the character very well and even fits the world maybe even better. It's not my favorite execution in the Wheel of Time. It feels a bit rushed. Jaime Lannister's role of being the pretty boy Lannister and leading battles and being this kind of general figure for this world is much better executed in my opinion. He's interesting to follow because he is such a flawed, good, bad guy. The decisions he makes, his backing of his brother, and being the defender of his brother being a key role to his character as well. All these things build to Jaime Lannister, at least for me, being much more interesting, so I'm giving this point to Jaime Lannister as well. Next up, we have interest to the reader. Galad suffers here quite a bit because he's not that interesting, at least for the first half of the series, maybe even more. He becomes extremely interesting at the end though, especially with his interactions with Perrin, but you could argue a lot of that interest is driven from Perrin and not Galad himself, and maybe the relationship between them. So in this category, I feel like Galad is suffering. I don't feel like anyone is really dying to see what Galad Damodred is up to. And if you are, you're in the minority like me. Jaime Lannister, on the other hand, once again shines and glows in this category. He is very interesting, so morally gray and chaotic, you can never really predict his actions. This alone for me gives Jaime Lannister the leg up here. You can almost never see his actions coming, and just enough times he falls on the right side of the story and his hesitation as a character comes through enough that you really want to actually back him. For this reason, I'm giving this point as well to Jaime Lannister. Next up, we have these characters' relationships, and unfortunately for Wheel of Time, I think there's a clear winner here as well. Galad has a lot of maybe shallower relationships, but none of them become thoroughly fleshed out, and as well as zero romantic interest for almost the entire series, except for one that's kind of shoehorned at the end. Jaime Lannister has a romantic interest, and a lot of fascinating dynamics within his family. Also, a kind of ego complex with himself that he has to overcome and fails to at times. Without even getting into it much more, I can go ahead and say Jaime Lannister takes this point as well. Finally, we have who would win in a fight. This is where Galad is going to shine. Yes, Jaime Lannister has very impressive dueling feats, but it's been stated that Wheel of Time fighters are on another level from Game of Thrones. The fact that Galad can take on an entire mob by himself, and he alone turned back a bunch of rioting peasants that were serving the Prophet, is incredibly interesting. Also, he's able to beat other blade masters fairly easily, as well as other experienced soldiers basically having their jaws hit the floor whenever Galad draws his blade. He actually doesn't even really sweat most of the time when they're around him. The only other wielder of a blade I'm aware of in fantasy that's not a magical being that could maybe beat Galad would be Lanman Dragarin. He is unequivocally one of the best duelists in all of fantasy, so Galad is going to clearly take the point. Now we have who would fare better in the other's world. Galad, moral absolutism in Game of Thrones. How does that work out for people? Galad would die. He would not die in a fight. He would be poisoned or squished or attacked in some kind of sneaky way where he would die. Jaime Lannister, on the other hand, with his charisma and able to get others on his side almost every time, regardless of the situation, and his actual abilities as a battle leader, general, and tactician really do give him a leg up here, and I think Jaime Lannister will get the final point and one of the largest victories of any Versus videos so far. Jaime Lannister wins. Thank you guys so much for coming in and watching the second fight of round one. I appreciate it. This was actually one of the easiest fights to do because just with the amount of time devoted to one character versus the other, there's a pretty clear winner. I'm going to go ahead and do another video later today that should be up. It's not going to be another versus comparison though. It will be kind of something special I haven't done before. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you'd like to support the channel and what I do here. And have a good few hours until I see you again. Peace.